Hey everyone, this is Lacey here with the Your Lyme Matters podcast, and this is episode number 4, and I am joined by Marie-Ève Bonneau. So hello, thank you so much for joining us on the Your Lyme Matters podcast. We're super excited to chat with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here with you, Lacey.
So you are right here in Calgary, Alberta, correct?
Yes, I'm currently living in Calgary.
Okay, so that's good for people to know because that means you're Albertan. Are you born and raised Albertan?
I wouldn't say born and raised. I'm a daughter of two Montrealers, French-speaking Montrealers, and I was actually raised in the Kootenays.
Okay, so you've got some diversity in there.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I guess I'll just kind of start by introducing. So you've battled Lyme and Co-infections yourself, and you're now working. So you're sort of on the later end of it there. I'll tell people a little how we met. So I don't remember the first exact point, so jump in any point in time. But I remember you were guiding a healing yoga-related practice in downtown Calgary. And I wound up at that as well. And I remember sort of reading a bit about you. And in there, I found that you had a bit of a similar journey with Lyme and Co-infections. So I'll let you tell the listeners your credentials in terms of what you do therapy-wise and your career. First off, to sort of let people know who I'm talking to here.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, as you mentioned, I did have a very extended healing journey. So probably about 15 years now. And in a lot of ways, I don't feel like that healing journey ever ended, which is something we may want to chat about today.
Yes.
So many people are looking for the end and being 100% better. And I really live it as an ongoing journey, an ongoing transformation. So I am currently now working as a soul-centered psychotherapist. I'm a facilitator. I'm a guide. And part of that is being an initiation guide because I see the chronic illness journey as an initiation. And you and I suspect we'll get into that perspective today. But my healing journey paved the way or laid the ground for the work I do now. So I work with people in their healing, in their transformation, in their actualizations. I work with people looking for healing, looking for wholeness, looking for well-being, and looking to live more authentic lives. So I am a psychotherapist, I'm a Canadian certified counselor, a facilitator. I absolutely love what I do. It's a passion, it's an honor. And I went to hell and back to be able to offer what I offer in the way that I offer it now.
Can you give us a little briefing? Like I know you're on sort of the later end of your healing journey now, but just to give listeners, you said you battled about 15 years. So eventually, I'm assuming you connected with some sort of practitioners at some point to aid in that healing process. Is that accurate to say? Were you able to connect with practitioners to help with the Lyme and Co-infection treatment?
Absolutely. Yet, like so many of us in the community, I saw more practitioners than I can probably count on my two hands in the quest for what the heck is going on with me? Why am I feeling so ill? Like so many, I was sent away from the conventional medical model with a clean bill of health over and over and over again. And yet I couldn't get out of bed, I couldn't function, I couldn't work. So it took many years to get the diagnosis, to find out that Lyme was part of what I was going through, because it was not the whole picture. And to finally find a practitioner who was Lyme literate, but not only Lyme literate, but truly masterful at what he did, I very much believe saved my life. So when I walked in through the doors of the center, I was literally fearing for my life. I no longer had any sense that I could figure this out on my own. I no longer had any sense that I was going to make it or be okay. So my father at the time called the center the Last Chance Saloon.
I remember at that yoga you facilitated, that healing. I remember you called it that. And
Yes.
I was like, the Last Chance Saloon. Interesting.
Yes, totally. And it's that for a few different reasons. Firstly, it was that because I was that ill at that time. And secondly, it was that, Lacey, because it's literally the visual I'm getting is like a poker table or a gambling table. I've never gambled, forgive me, but it's like where you put all your chips in, because financially it was so next level in terms of an investment that it was like, this has to work because I've got nothing left physically and I've got nothing left financially. To get there, I saw many well-meaning practitioners who were confident they could help me, But looking back in hindsight, I will not name these people because I don't believe in doing defamation of character in any way. They were well-meaning, good practitioners or good-hearted practitioners, but just were nowhere near equipped to deal with the level of complex chronic illness that I was living through at the time.
Right. Yeah. And that's perfectly put. Exactly that. There are some practitioners that they list Lyme and co-infections, but as we know, and as we hear more about today, it's now considered Lyme co-infections and the multiple systems it affects and the multiple other diagnoses that it can trigger in people. So it's such a complex diseases, symptoms, diagnosis, and so I started with a team that was not the right fit for me. As a result, it took way longer. It set me back a couple of years. So for each person to find the specialist for them that works for them, hopefully they are well versed in all of those things. And that's actually something that you'll hear in the podcast and other interviews that we talk about as well. The things to look for in a practitioner that might be helpful, because there is now pretty defined lists of what interferes with the healing. So hopefully those practitioners, and I've talked about it before, hopefully if they hear this, they are becoming a little bit more dynamically versed in all the things that come to play and affect the pace, or if we are healing, essentially.
Yes, I agree with that. And I would also add that my experience was that no one practitioner had all the pieces. So even my experiences at the center, as much as it provided a very significant piece, it was nowhere near the full spectrum of everything I needed to be truly well or truly healed. So my experience, and I would encourage people who are journeying and seeing different practitioners, but it's to take what works and sort of add it to your toolkit, gather it in, add it to your basket. But ultimately, my healing had to come from my own gathering process, and no one practitioner had all the pieces.
Right. And that's us giving people a really realistic view on it, so that they don't go into it with that hope they'll have that one or three appointments and it's all sorted. It's a slow evolving process that does require a lot from the person healing in particular.
It's huge. It's huge. It is such a big ask. And I think the level of self-responsibility that's required to heal, I feel, is a level of radical responsibility. And I think that so many people with Lyme or any complex chronic conditions, they so much want somebody else to heal them. Like, tell me what's wrong with me, tell me what to do, you do it for me. And I think that's a really old model. And I think that what we're seeing more and more is the more that an individual can take radical responsibility for their health, for their healing, in my opinion and experience, the higher your chance is of healing. It doesn't mean that what happened to you is your fault or that you're to blame, but it means that your healing is your responsibility. And that's not just the physical, but the mental, not just the mental, but the emotional. And in my world, the spiritual. So it's a really multi-dimensional process. And I think that's why there's no one practitioner that might check all those boxes for you. You might have to gather as you go.
Yeah, and I've heard people also use the words, the people that are willing to pivot tend to have a better outcome. So you might go into it, for example, I know this therapy, I've researched it, I'm going to look for this practitioner. You might go see that practitioner. They might pivot you. They say, well, Lacey, what about this? And then you sit there and you go, oh, I didn't expect that.
I think also what's so humbling about this journey is that you will probably fail as many times, if not more, than you succeed. Like, I think the process of healing is very trial and error. And people don't want to hear that. They want to be given a set recipe or a set model. But if I learned anything, it was that my healing was as unique as I am. And as I was healing from Lyme, people kept messaging me and Facebook and all this and saying, what did you do to heal? Give me your recipe. And I kept saying to people, there isn't a set recipe, because the recipe that worked for me was unique to my body and my life and who I am as a person. And that might be totally different for you. And there might be a little bit of crossover, but your healing is as unique as you are.
Yeah, that's also very nicely put. The issues that can happen sometimes if you take a multi-page plan designed this way and you give it to that person, right? It's like it's not designed to you. It's not designed to your life experiences, past or current, your genetics, all of that stuff. So it gets very tricky. It's a very tricky thing for sure.
It's super tricky, and it asks that we trust the process, that we trust the unfolding, that we be willing to fail. You know, a beautiful quote comes to mind, and it's fall down 7 times, get up 8. And for me, that was so much the journey. It was like fall down 7 times, like you keep falling. No, this didn't work, or this treatment didn't work, or this practitioner didn't work, or this new diet didn't work. But it's fall down 7 times, get up 8. So you keep dusting yourself off, you keep trying, you keep persevering. And I think the complex chronic illnesses like Lyme, they ask so much of us in terms of faith, in terms of perseverance, in terms of trust, in terms of courage. These are some of the reasons why I see it as an initiation, a rite of passage.
Yeah. And so just even hearing that it asks so much. And for me, I would say it asked everything almost. Like it took everything I had that I thought I had, and then it asked more, like, you know, different or more or pivoting. And I thought, looking back, I'm like, wait, I already gave everything every single day still, but it's still, so that's the hard part for people. One of 800,000 hard parts about this.
Totally.
But I did want to ask you, as you were mentioning that, you said something comes to mind: fall down 7 times, get up 8.
Yeah.
For you, what mindset or what was the end kind of thought that helped you get up all those times, the 8, or was it multiple different things?
You know, that is such an important question and such a great question. I think for me, one of the frameworks or one of the mindsets that helped me the most to keep going and to keep going in the face of an impossible situation, like you say, I've got nothing left to give and still this marathon continues. The mindset that helped me was to reframe it as an initiation or as a rite of passage. And I'll unpack what I mean by that. What I mean by an initiation is that I started to see the illness as a formative process that wasn't futile, that wasn't a mistake, that wasn't all for nothing, but that it was actually almost like a cosmic setup or divinely set up, and that it was asking me to grow or forcing me to grow in some ways that were actually deeply intelligent. So the experience was shaping me. It was asking me to let go of things that were no longer relevant or no longer authentic. It was asking me to ask the really big questions about myself, about life, about the universe, about God. So it was this multi-layered formative process, or like a tempering journey. And knowing somewhere in the back of my mind that it wasn't all for nothing, I started to believe that I was being prepared for my life's work, that somehow I was walking through this journey or crawling or dragging myself, because that's a lot more what it was.
Definitely.
But that it was actually for something, that I was actually becoming someone through that process, and that I was being prepared to serve in the way that I was destined to serve. So this framework of looking at it in a really big way and of starting to have a sense of meaning and purpose. And Viktor Frankl talks about this at length, right? That when we have a why, we can endure. And so my why started being, hey, I'm actually really curious where this is leading. I'm really curious who this is making me into, who I'm becoming. And I'm curious, what do I have to give as a result of this experience that I didn't have to give before? And how is that actually good and right? Like, how is this not a mistake or not some horrible cosmic accident, but how is there actually something intelligent at play here? So that's what I mean when I say initiation. Does that answer the question?
Definitely, yeah. So for people listening here, there's different stages, and I don't have the technical words for them yet. I'm sure a lot of places don't, but there's the phase where we don't yet know what's going on with us. We have no diagnosis, and we have a diagnosis. We're starting to, but even then, we're still a lot of unknowns in that phase there.
Yeah.
And then, so for you, did this contemplation, this rite of passion, sorry, not rite of pass, help, you might have to help me
I
out.
love that. Rite of passion. What a great
Sure.
passage. Yeah, I love it.
Rite of passion.
Yeah.
So where did this start in this healing phase for you? Because I hear a lot of people talk about, the medical parts of it. But then for me, it sort of peters off about when people start to feel maybe 50, and even using a percentage of healing is controversial because
Yes.
it's a evolving journey, right? So it's not to create anxiety in people saying I only feel about 50% before I got sick type of thing. But for you, where did this shift start to happen?
That's a really, really great question. And it brings to mind the hero's journey because you're talking about phases. And I think the Lyme journey is a hero's journey. And there's actually three distinct phases in the hero's journey. And the first phase is what is often called leaving home. So that's the phase where it's like, something is up here. I don't feel well. I'm no longer able to keep being who I was being. I'm having to let things go. I'm having to die to some old version of myself. I have a lot of resistance. I have despair. I have terror. I don't know what's going on. So the first phase is really like an unraveling of everything that we held together in our life, whether that's our job or our roles or our social life. So I know for me, when I first fell ill, I was a yoga teacher. I was a dancer. I was a social butterfly. I had a certain sense of who I was and what my life was about. And as I fell ill, all of that started to fall away. I couldn't keep teaching yoga. I couldn't keep performing. I couldn't keep going to parties. So there was this real unraveling. So that's phase one. And I think for most people, Lacey, phase one is not inspired on any level.
Okay,
It's not,
okay, yeah.
yeah, we don't feel inspired. We don't have meaning. It's completely disorienting.
Okay. Yes, I can vouch for what Marie-Ève is saying here. It's not the funnest of the phases, but I'll second that.
Yeah, so any sense of control we have is sort of being ripped away from us. Phase two of the hero's journey is called the descent. And this tends to be a very dark between phase where this is sort of the phase where it's like, okay, I'm no longer a yoga teacher. I'm no longer a dancer. I no longer socialize. I've even lost my apartment. I had to move back in with my mother. I lost my intimate relationship because it couldn't survive the turmoil of Lyme. So you end up almost, I liken this to dying while still being alive. And for me, the descent was like being in bed for days on end, being housebound, being very frightened, very alone. Sometimes we call this the dark night of the soul. And yet, it is in that part of the process that these deeply meaningful frameworks started to bubble up. So, in the quiet, in the long hours alone in bed, it was like some type of alchemical process started happening inside of me where I was processing a lot of my life events I hadn't processed before because I was so busy out there being cool and going to parties and dancing. So there was this deeply profound, mysterious process that started to percolate. And in that, I started to get in touch with like a deeper truth of the journey. Like, hey, something really meaningful is happening here. Or hey, there's actually an opportunity present here. And it's
Okay.
awful. It's coming in an awful package. I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. And
Right.
yet
Yeah.
there's actually an opportunity here. Like I am getting in touch with myself. I'm tapping in a way that the busy life didn't allow me to. And so that framework started to percolate, I would say then in the darkest days.
And when you say percolate, because
Mhm.
I'm curious for myself also. Now, is
Yeah.
this a little thought that pops into your head? Is this a conversation you had with someone else, and then you had a thought pop into your head? Hey, something might be a brewing here. I might be having some sort of shift, potentially positive. I've got some.
That's actually a great question. So I wouldn't liken it to a thought. I would liken it to something far deeper than what happens in the conscious mind, which could be instinct, it could be intuition, it could be coming up through the body's wisdom. I'm a highly sensitive person. I'm an intuitive, I'm a mystic. On the days that I was even a little bit well enough, I would take myself out to the woods, out to the forest, and I would literally listen with my whole being. Am I allowed to curse on your podcast?
Yes.
I would literally be out in the woods and I would be like, what the fuck, God? Right? So I would be holding these questions out to the universe, like, what are you up to with my life? What is this about? And so I think it came more through intuition, through receiving guidance in a more spiritual sense. And I have to also credit the incredible teachers in our world who I'm a huge reader. So I had some very profound influences in the books I was reading or things I was watching that were really planting the seeds of this deeper framework, this other way of seeing things. And
Wow.
it gave me great solace, Lacey. It was like the difference between being in hell or actually being held by something benevolent, having some kind of meaning, some kind of framework that led me to believe I would somehow be okay no matter what happened.
That is very interesting to hear. Yeah. And
Mm.
also that it wasn't necessarily a thought that just came into your head or a discussion.
Mm.
It sounds like it's a sense of knowing, intuition, a combination. You can feel it. So these little things are bubbling up for you. And
Yeah.
then tell us a little bit where it comes from the bubbling up to maybe some of these steps now where you've got this feeling, you know deep inside of you, and how does it go from the bubbling up to an active following this and taking actions towards whatever you're being called to do in this case?
You ask really good questions. So
Thank you.
I want to mention, because I think this is so important for listeners, and I wish that I was told this at the time when I was in it. Part of that bubbling up, that knowing, as you called it, or that intuitive process, it's kind of like following breadcrumbs. I think this is very much the way that intuitives live or highly sensitive beings live. But that is also how I found the center and how I found the breadcrumbs to my healing. I think the center was mentioned to me 3 times. And the third time I twigged, I was like, oh, this is actually a sign, like I'm being guided. And for whoever's listening, I want to say, listen up, because the more you make yourself available for the messages coming your way or the things you scroll through, or even listening to podcasts like this one, you're actually being guided. You're actually being guided, but you have to be available for that.
Right. And how might somebody who's, let's say, because there's all different phases of people, we still have the people not yet the full diagnosis, we have the ones in bed with a lot of brain issues. Off the top of our heads, how might someone open up to that? Would that just be mental to themselves saying, I'm going to be open to this? How might, and as you said, you can even do it by listening to this podcast. This is
Yes.
people speaking about guidance and healing. So that's
Yeah.
one way right there.
Absolutely. I think you said the key word, which I think is openness. It's like stay open. And I know it gets really, really dark when we're ill and we feel like shit. It gets really, really dark. And there's days of despair and days of hopelessness. And that is natural and that is to be expected. But please, please, please keep the door open. Even if you can only keep it open a crack, keep some type of openness that your healing is trying to reveal itself to you, or your path is trying to reveal itself to you, because it is. But you have to believe. There has to be even the slightest, flickering flame of belief that somehow there will be a miracle, somehow you will get well, even if you don't know how. Because I think there's an inner attitude that those who get well have, and it has to
right.
do with that openness. It has to do with that belief. And I would go so far as to say that in my community and for myself and for the people I work with, it has to do with being receptive or being tuned in or being available. Like for me, my healing didn't come from going to doctors or doing the prescribed pathways, but it came through an intuitive unfolding and walking into that. And I know for some people that's woo woo, but I believe that we are our own best healers. We are our own best healers. Nobody knows your body the way you do. Nobody knows your life or your heart the way you do. So there's a way that we have to be highly participating in our own healing journey.
I'll add for people really quick there.
Yeah.
Woo woo. I hear that a lot. But if you are somebody here who is maybe not in the Lyme and co-infection community and you're like, what is woo woo? That's sort of a term for something that people perceive it as fantasy, sort of, or, not realistic, that kind of stuff. That's what woo woo means. And I've heard that a lot myself and pivoted towards what people think is woo woo, because when you're as sick as we have been, you will try almost anything to
You
heal.
will.
Yeah, I went as far to have had a metal thing on my forehead, and it's a doctor that the Klinghardt method. And I remember telling my practitioner, I said, I feel either like a unicorn with a metal horn, or an alien, and they just laughed at me. They're like, yeah, but that ultimately gave us something to confirm the clinical. Was that what people perceive as woo woo? So that's woo woo.
I love your description. And I think what you've said is so important. It's that when we go, which most of us have, when we go to the conventional routes of health, medical, whatever it is, and we are turned away with no answers, we have to get creative. We have to get creative. Otherwise, we're sent home to die or to perish or to be housebound and bedridden. And so for me, a lot of the healing journey was about empowering myself, which is why you hear me talk so much about being self-led and tuning in and trusting my knowing. Because if I hadn't done that, I would still be ill. And when I did start tuning in, I realized that I could actually navigate with that intuition or that knowing, and that it would lead me to many other options for healing, many of which totally worked.
Yeah.
Right?
And that pulls back to what you said about openness.
Yeah.
Openness in your healing is a skill that will be helpful for you. Just you don't have to accept it, but being open to at least even hearing it is a step for some people.
Yes.
So openness, 100%. I haven't quite thought of that word on my own, so thank you for putting that word for me there, openness. One thing I'll quickly touch on here is, because it's difficult for people, you mentioned somehow believing. So I'll get your thoughts on it. I've come to a conclusion that sometimes, even if we're logically not able that day to be like, I believe I can heal, I like to mention this to people, and it helps some people don't like it, but so even that day, if you might not believe it, the fact that you might take a sip of water, that's your actions are still telling you that you're wanting to live, because even something as simple as taking a pill, picking up that water, even sitting on the edge of your bed, that is an action. That's a behavior that shows us that you still have some fight in you, whether you logically can believe it in that moment or not. And in your experiences, Marie-Ève, because you work with people around these topics, is there anything else that comes to mind for you around that, in terms of people that are hearing this and they're saying, Lacey and Marie-Ève, today I just don't believe it? Or is it as simple as just carry on the next day if you don't believe it that day? Or is it more something internal for some people they might not be able to put words on? What would you say in those?
No, Lacey, I'm going to say something that's quite controversial, and I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't lived it myself. And that's, some days we need to pull our socks up and be positive and keep our chin up and work on our mindset. Some days that is the right thing to do. Other days, within reason, the right thing to do is to allow ourselves to sink. Yeah, to be in despair, to grapple with the hard realities of the situation, like that is part of the process. And when I was in school studying to be a psychotherapist, I studied a body of work called post-traumatic growth, and I studied that quite intensively. And this is the idea that we grow through our challenging experiences. And the researchers who came up with this body of work proved over and over that we grow through our challenges. We grow through grappling with the challenges. We grow through the fact that we're out of our depth, that it's hard, that there's days that we can't pull our socks up. There's days that we don't have hope. We don't have the answers. That's part of the process. And it's controversial to say this because our society is so much about pull your socks up, keep your chin up, all this. But there's actually fruits in, I'm just going to say it, there's actually fruits in the hopeless days. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Days where you surrender, days where you don't have the energy to pull your socks up. Like there's actually treasures in that, because I think it's in those days that we learn to surrender to something greater than ourselves. Because I had so many days in my Lyme journey where I didn't know how I was going to make it. I didn't know if I was going to survive or live. I didn't know if it was going to work out for me. So it's paradoxical, because on one track, it's like, this is deeply meaningful. This is leading somewhere. This is fruitful. And on another track, it's like, I'm in hell and I don't know if this is ever going to be over. But I learned to surrender to something greater than myself. I actually learned to hand my life over and hand my healing over to a higher power, or to life, or to the mystery. And I think that in life, we only surrender on that level when we have to.
Right.
People talk about surrender, but people don't really get how deeply you have to surrender when you're going through something like Lyme. You surrender not because it's a cool spiritual idea, but you surrender because you're on your knees and you've used every trick that was up your sleeve, and you've got nothing left. But the descent, again, which is the second phase of the hero's journey, is all about this type of energy. It's kind of like the caterpillar who goes into the cocoon and is liquefied. Like the caterpillar is completely liquefied and decimated. That's what we're talking about in the healing journey. There is a phase of that.
Okay. Okay.
So it's
Yeah. Yeah.
paradoxical, right? It's like some days pull your socks up, work on your mindset. And some days it's like surrender deeply and hand this over, because on some level it's not in your control.
Right. That's kind of what I was curious about, is because as you know, in society there is a lot of that, you have to stay positive, every single day. And for me, there's some days 100% it's no dice. No, like today is not the day. And if somebody tried to tell me that today is the day that I do that, I'd be like, curse words, so it's awesome to hear that versatility in your answers, and I'd imagine that conveys over to people you work with and help. It allows people the flexibility to be human in there at the same time, because my gosh, if you tell anybody they're going to be sick for 1 year straight, 2 years straight, 3 years, and then I talk to people, in your case 15 years straight, I'm sorry, you're not going to be zippy dippy every single day. There's no way that's going to happen. So I think it's nice for people to hear that, and it makes sense. You've had such a long journey, 15 years. So just kudos to you for being here and speaking and sharing after 15 years.
And I think, the really difficult aspects of this process, the really difficult aspects are what makes it so formative. That is exactly what makes it so formative, what makes it so transformative. And I think that if people can walk through the initiation, the rite of passage, that level of difficulty, and be willing to be undone, be willing to be transformed, be willing to be changed, be willing to have your ideas about yourself and life be turned on their head, this is exactly the people who allow for that come out on the other side, not just symptom-free and the same person, but they come out completely transformed. And that is completely different. Like that is worlds apart, because you can come out on the other side of this and you can be the same person, but have a reduction in symptoms or be symptom-free. Or you can come out on the other side and be a transformed human that has different values, that has a different way of walking in the world, that has different perspectives, that has a heart that's been cracked open. You can be somebody who is matured at your depth, right? If you open to the experience, there's that word again, open.
Yeah.
But if you kind of just walk through and kind of just keep control and kind of just hold it together, you'll be the same person on the other side. And I truly believe with all that I am, that these illnesses come for a purpose, that these illnesses come because they are looking to transform us. They are looking to wake us up. They are looking to realign us with a different way of being or a different life.
Wow, that is so powerful. I'm
Yes.
just taking that in here. Even though I'm the host, yeah,
And
just taking it in.
I want to roll with this, Lacey, and just say that
Roll.
this is why I have trouble when people say, "Are you 100% healed?" And it's like, did I go back to being the person I was before? No. Because if I did, I would have missed the whole point of the journey. I wouldn't have gone through the rite of passage. So am I still housebound and bedridden? No. Am I still disabled? No. But does my life now look anything like it did before? No. I've been totally transformed. I live my life from a different place inside myself. And the way that I understand that is making the shift from being personality driven and thinking I'm in control to actually being soul led and handing my life over to a higher power. And that shift happened through that very intense experience.
Wow.
There's no
Yeah.
way we don't hand over the steering wheel on our life unless we absolutely have to.
Right, right. And so when I heard in there, and something that I can kind of also add to is that transformation of who you were before, and then depending how long your journey is, what you went through, that really, really intense, completely changed person on the other side of it.
Yeah.
And so I've been struggling to find the words, so I'd imagine other people might be too. I've described it to some as like a hard reboot almost, like where
Yes.
some of the things I used to do, like I played college volleyball. I can't remember. It's like my brain didn't allow me to remember those things as certain parts of the journey. I can't remember what it feels like to even touch a volleyball or hit a volleyball or anything, because it's been such a complete 360 degree, 360, 365,
Full circle.
360. Yeah.
Yeah.
Transformation on the other end of that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I hear what you're saying also when you say that's where there's a bit of controversy in when, if people choose to say the percentage of healing that they are, because they are such a different person also, as you said in there. So we talked about the descent, and you may have already mentioned after descent, is there a third thing of this process?
You
may have already mentioned it.
You're so good at tracking. I also have notes, and I was like, we've got to talk about phase 3 at some point. Yeah. So we had leaving home, which is phase 1 of the hero's journey. And then we had the descent, as you mentioned, which is phase 2. And then phase 3 is often called in the literature, and we're talking about Joseph Campbell's body of work here, Hero with 1,000 Faces. So phase 3 is often called the return. So this is where we see in stories and myths and fairy tales where the hero has left home, has had a profound ordeal, sometimes called the supreme ordeal, and then comes back to bring the gifts of that ordeal to the people. So that's the treasures of the journey, the gifts of the undergoing, and then the whole purpose of it is to offer those gifts to the community, to be of service, to begin to live what I call living as a blessing. Right? So that in that sense, the journey has not all been for nothing. It was not futile, but it was actually a deeply intelligent pathway that, if you're open to it, is leading you to make your most true and most authentic and most valuable contribution to the world.
Wow. It's very nice for me to hear the words of this. Yes, because I'm sort of in that I'm still healing phase myself here, because I can now put some words to it, because I was like, how do I put words to this phase of that I'm in of the healing, the kind of working things out, still treating a little bit, but you're no longer fully laying down in bed every day type of thing. So thank you for putting some words to that. And it sounds like that's some interesting content. And you said it was Joseph Campbell's work?
Yes, Joseph Campbell. So he's a mythologist, but also with your podcast, this is a perfect example of the return, right? Like that you are starting to offer to your community based on your healing journey. If you hadn't had Lyme, you would never be doing this for a living.
No, 100%. Because listeners know I come from a healthcare background. Yes. And never ever did I think that I would be telling people I started a podcast. Right. And still to this day, when I tell some people, they kind of look at me and they're like, oh, cool. Like, don't really know what to say.
Yeah.
So, but, go ahead. You can ask me anything. Yeah.
I think this is the highest, or one of the most life-affirming frameworks for people who are going through chronic illness. And I think what often, and this is the model of you're not going through this for nothing. There's an intelligence to this process. And in the same way as the caterpillar leaves its life as a caterpillar, goes into the cocoon and is reborn as a butterfly with a completely different way of moving in the world, you too, going through chronic illness, are going through a transformation. And most of us resist the shit out of this. Yeah, we resist the shit out of it. Like we go kicking and screaming the whole way.
Yeah.
And I want to say that I think this is one of the highest frameworks that the chronically ill, those experiencing chronic illness, can walk with. It's what if there's something powerful here for me? What if this is an opportunity in a horrible disguise? What if this is actually divinely orchestrated for me, not against me? And I think the one thing that really trips people up over and over, and it's in this word recover, is we hope to recover. And by recovering, it's like we just want to go back to the way we were before. But chronic illness comes to crack us wide open. And so many of us are like, I don't want that. I just want to keep being who I am. I want to recover who I was being before. But I think that there's actually an evolutionary pathway in the illness that it wants to take you somewhere. It wants to take you somewhere. And there's a lot of grit required, but there's also a lot of surrender required to get there.
Right. And some of the things that you said there, I'm recalling from your book that I did read, and that I actually lucked out in a giveaway that you had done. And so I got your book for free, because for me, the financial aspects were equally as devastating as the rest. And so the fact that you gave that free book, it created opportunity for me to read it. And so I pick up your book still, because I have all these different books, and some days it's content, you know, like medical stuff. But I pick up your book when I need it sometimes. I need something light. I need something that's it's not the fluffy duffy type of positivity. It teaches you less resistance to it all, and that there might be another reason why. And it makes you think. You do in your book, you say, what if? And by the way, my apologies, I didn't toot your horn in a proper introduction. My podcast introductions is my least strong suit. So I didn't even say that you're also an author. So Marie-Ève has also written a book. It's called Resting in Presence, Reflections from the Heart of Healing. And I do pick up that book because sometimes I just need that. I need a little quote from it. And I
have our copy here today. Hey, you had yours and I had mine. Yeah.
Look at the mess coming out of the top of
mine. I've got a mess coming out of it. And so for people who are intrigued by this, it's a little short work, so it's really easy to read. It's available on Amazon. And it's just really an offering from my heart to the heart of those who are undergoing and walking this difficult journey. And it's so courageous, and it really touches my heart to know that the book has landed with you like that. So thank you for saying that.
Yes, I'm very happy to have received it. And it's just such a helpful way to view the things that are happening regardless. In our environments, it's slightly different, and it does. And in her book, she just says, what if, you know? So it's not an aggressive, it's like, you should view it this way. It's that query. And then you sit there and you think, what if? What if, you know? That's basically what it does for me. So yeah, so that's a lovely, lovely book. If anybody's able to get access to it, I would definitely recommend it. And it's nice on my brain, if that makes sense. Like there's some days my brain just needs that type of writing. And so I pick it up selectively. I say, today I need this one, you know, today. Yeah. So thank you for writing that book as well.
Thank you. I'll tell you a little secret. I guess it's not a secret because it's not just, but these pieces, there's 123 short works here. This was the skim off the top of my actual book manuscript. Yeah, this is actually just the little amuse-bouche, the little appetizer. So the actual book, I'm waiting to have the courage to go again on book 2, because a book is a lot of work. But yeah, I'm looking forward to releasing that one in the near future. But I want to say to people listening that one of the most powerful tools that got me through my healing was journaling. That by far was one of the most comforting, most helpful, most grounding tools that I used. And what is in this book is some of the selections from my journal. So this is pieces from 10 years of healing writings. But if anyone out there is feeling drawn to explore writing or to process their healing journey or Lyme journey through writing, I cannot encourage that highly enough. I think it is so nourishing and so healing to journal through the healing process.
Yeah, well, thank you for giving that pointer out. I also have done journaling on and off, and sometimes I share it, sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's just a couple, 3 sentences, a messy pile of papers. It depends on the day, but I would agree you have to find a way to somehow get it out. Has there been times when you've tried to hold it in that you can recall back to and what happened? Or if not, that's okay too, but
hold it in terms of like not expressing it.
yes.
You know
Or
what?
even holding it in terms of maybe not getting to your writing soon enough, or
Yeah, not so much that because I'm like an obsessive journaler. I journal probably every day. But what comes to mind from your question is that early on in the journey, I had a lot of shame over being ill. I had a lot of shame, and so I wasn't speaking even to my closest friends about what I was going through. And this was like really, really early days because it got to the point where I had a blog and I was, did a GoFundMe for my healing. It got to the point where it was very public that I was undergoing or had Lyme and whatnot. But in the early days, I did bottle it up and keep it inside. And it was a huge relief and a huge healing in itself when I got to the point where I started to speak to people close to me about what I was going through. So I think for anyone who's in that phase of being embarrassed or ashamed or making themselves wrong for what they're going through, there's something so healing in letting that out, even if it's just with the close people in your life.
did you have access to somebody to speak with, neutral, like a coach or anyone like that, or a therapist yourself? I know I had a therapist the whole time.
I think I've had many people along the way. Like I did have a lot of different practitioners along the way. But I think what was so healing for me, like that's obviously always excellent, but it was like coming clean to loved ones was huge.
Okay, yeah.
My boyfriend at the time, we're talking years ago now, or whether that was like my close friend, I think making peace with our humanness, yeah, and being real with each other is so, so, so healing. That vulnerability piece.
Yeah, and I know even for myself, when you mentioned this shame, it's I don't know how to describe it with words, but you can feel it and it creeps in there. Most of us didn't say, "Hey, please make me very, very severely ill." A lot of us, I think feel sometimes that I must have done something to deal with this, but the reality is probably not. It might be other things, as you're pointing out. It could be you need a transformation. It could be you're going too hard in life, and until you get that message, you're going to be a little slow with the healing type of thing. So
You've just said something that is so important and that I'm really compelled to speak to, which is that piece of going too hard. And I want to talk about that for just a brief moment. This, for me, was one of the things that took me down. When I first felt ill, I was in my mid to late 20s, and I was just going for it on every level, whether that was, performing as a dancer, facilitating movement workshops, being a yoga teacher, socializing, going to music festivals, you name it. And I think at the time, I didn't recognize my body's cues to slow the F down. And they kept coming and they kept coming and they kept coming. And I think it took a complete and utter crash into the Lyme void for me to understand that slowing down was not optional. And so this links back to when people say, are you 100% now? Like, are you going back to how you were before? And I think that for me, the symptoms came with a purpose and they came with a message. And one of those key messages was to slow down. And I've had an experience, even though I'm like super well now compared to how I used to be. But even in the last few years, Lacey, I had a moment where I was like, it wasn't a moment, it was several months where I thought to myself, I'm 100% well now. I'm going to do whatever I want. And I got back on that kind of life merry-go-round where I was teaching, I was traveling, I was socializing, I was overdoing it on every level. And I can tell you that very quickly I began to feel unwell again. And so this is another thing where if your symptoms are coming with a set purpose or a set message, like slow down, because a slower pace of life takes better care of you, it honors you more, it takes care of your purpose in life more. You may find that if you don't heed that message or you don't get that message from the symptoms, that it will persevere. Whereas if you get the message and heed the message, the symptoms will resolve themselves. And so what I learned the hard way was like me trying to be like I was before I fell ill was actually going counter the symptom message of why it showed up in the first place. Does that make sense?
100%. And it's so interesting that you had actually, we have similar messages in that regard. Mine's been right in my face, the slow down. Even years ago, a different type of returning to employment, it went terribly. I regressed very, very bad after it.
Yeah.
So that every time I've tried to push too hard, one of my old symptoms or a completely different symptom creeps in there and sets me back, like in terms of the whole healing. And so now I'm able to look at that and say, you can't. It's simply, I'm not really made to go back to that exactly anymore. I'm different. I've changed differently. So I can't go back to the same anymore. And so that's tough for certain people in society where they have that pressure, go, 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 perform, take care, do this. So I run into people in the community as well. And myself, being socialized by competitive sport, I have what they call tough guys. Tough guys. You may have heard that, where basically push through. But as you know, sometimes if you push through with these illnesses, the result is not always the best.
It doesn't tend to be pretty, no.
It's bad.
Absolutely. And I think what I want to offer, and I think you're getting this as well, is that that doesn't mean that you're not healed. It just means that to stay healed, you have to live in a certain way that is conducive to your well-being. And I think that our society in general is set up in a way where the expectations on us are completely unreasonable. And I'm saying that without any hesitation. It's like the expectations that you should be able to work this much and play this much and shop this much and eat these foods. It's like we're literally set up to burn ourselves out and to be ill.
Right.
And so I think when we start to sensitize and we start to listen to our bodies and realize, hey, I need to live a lot slower, or I need to sleep more, or I need to eat a certain way, or I need time in nature, or else I don't feel as well. That is actually what I would call alignment. And in that place of alignment, we feel well. And when we leave that alignment, we start to feel sick again. I think this is the intelligence of the body at work.
Alignment. So, there you go. That is just amazing to me.
Yes.
For the people at any phase, but alignment in general. So for you, like without going too much off the topic we're just on here.
Yeah, go for it.
I know you love writing, but how did it come to mind that I'd like to share my gifts via a book with others?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, I experience being guided. So I think I don't have the experience of it coming from me, but it coming through me.
Through you, okay.
Mm-hmm. Another word that I use for that is being called, right? Like I was called to write a book. It was like, this is what needs to happen. This is what I'm being guided to do. In the same way as actually when I was in the descent, in the darkest phases of my healing, I had the vision of the work I was going to be doing. I downloaded my company name, Centered Within, and I had a really clear vision of what I was being guided to do. So part of the surrender was shifting from, and this is hard for some people to understand, but let's see if I can put words to it, was the shift from being the doer and the decider. Yeah, that it's like, I'm the one who decides what I'm doing and I'm making the actions and taking making the choices and taking the actions. It's shifting from living to being lived. That there is a current of life coming through me that has an intelligence that wants to move me in a certain way. And when I attune to that, align with that, there's that word again, and flow with that, everything becomes a lot easier. And when I'm out of alignment with that or not attuned to that, I don't feel so good and things don't flow so well and things don't go so good in my life.
That's wisdom that can transfer outside of this community as well. I'll have some people checking this out that are not Lyme and co-infection related at all.
So once upon a time before I was ill, I was a dancer. So I was a performer, and I also loved going to like dance festivals and going to ecstatic dance. And one thing I noticed at that time, I was in my early to mid 20s, right before I fell ill, is when you're on the dance floor and it's very trancy and very hypnotic and very rhythmic, it starts out that you're the one dancing. Yeah, you're the one busting the moves and kind of deciding what you're doing. And then if you allow for it, there's a shift that happens where you are no longer dancing, you are being danced. It's like something takes over and it just starts to do itself.
Okay.
And that's when the magic happens. It's like athletes would call it a flow state.
Yeah.
Yeah, so people who are athletes, like skiers, runners, experience this. It's like something just takes over and starts to move you.
Thank you for adding that in. I appreciate that.
So in the same way as I experienced that on the dance floor in my 20s, I experienced that in life now, where it's like when I stopped trying so damn hard, when I stopped trying to figure it out and fix it and make decisions, I can actually just relax and lean back and let life take care of me and let life guide me and let life show me the way. And this is so revolutionary in that it is not the way we're taught to live at all. This is totally opposite, right?
Right. Yeah.
But it's a surrendered state of flow that I actually learned in my healing. This is one of the gifts of Lyme. I learned when I was literally on my deathbed because I didn't know if I was going to make it. I learned to let go, Lacey. Like I learned to let go in a way that I never would have let go otherwise.
In general, I know there's therapy strategies for letting go. Now, for those sitting there saying, how can I let go? Like, how do I do that? What would you tell them as a little help, like to how you might let go? Would that be letting go of the control? Would that be a mental, kind of statement that helps remind, or what would that look like?
I love that question. We can start so simple and so easy, and we always start in the present moment. We start in the here and now. So it could just start with letting your shoulders relax away from your ears. Yeah, so this kind of energy, it's like you can just relax your shoulders down, hand the shoulders over. A lot of people tend to clench their jaw. Can you just soften your jaw a little bit? Could you allow your belly to become a little rounder, a little softer?
Right. Because when the shoulders are up, and as you're familiar, there's a lot of tension and resistance, and so some body type of scanning, it sounds like, to help you get prepared to potentially surrender to the day or whatever it is.
Yes. And then there's the breath, right? Like so many of us are breathing in this really shallow area. So in a lot of the programs I offer now, we do really simple nervous system regulation work and breath work. And so it could be as simple as having a sigh, taking a big breath in through your nose and out through your mouth.
Yeah. So Marie-Ève and I just did one, as some may be able to see, some may be able to hear. Yeah. And I think for us to model it right here in the podcast is also ideal, right? I noticed there was a little bit of tension in my shoulders, not too much, but a smidgen. And my diaphragm allowed me to lift upright in my posture when I did that. So
yes,
just little things like that. It doesn't have to be huge. It can be something just sitting in your chair per se.
Yes, and work it from the present moment. So often we try to fix our whole life or fix the whole story. It's like start where you are, start in this moment. And I think another beautiful strategy for letting go is nature. Go put your bare feet on the earth or go lie on the earth. You can actually hand yourself over to the earth. I did that so many times in my healing journey where I would literally go to the woods. I would take my shoes off. I would lie in the grass and I would probably cry. Just let go, just let go, just hand it over. Watch the clouds go by in the sky. Just set it all down, even if it's for a minute. especially when
And
we're healing, right? We're trying to figure it out and fix it and keep track of so much and get somewhere and make something happen. Like, all of that is exhausting, and it puts us in a stress state that is actually not healing.
you're also reminding me that I haven't been in nature, but I find that also very, very comforting. There's a quiet sometimes you can get from the mountains, for example, or
Yeah,
just watching a really peaceful animal or anything like that.
yeah, it's
Um,
about it.
yeah, so the present, so it sounds like the present moment, not thinking too much about the future and the things you can't control, also helpful there. And so are you still with your practice, are you still offering sometimes group healing type things, or what is that looking like for you right now in your practice?
Yeah, I am absolutely. So I do one-on-one work internationally. So I do have clients who come to my space in Calgary, and then I work with people one-on-one internationally on Zoom, which is wonderful. And then I do group work. So sometimes on Zoom and then often live. I love the live group work. So I'm doing my creative writing course this fall. We start September 19, but I'm always offering things in a group setting because I believe that being together is inherently very healing.
Yeah, but I would imagine, especially with such an isolating type of illnesses, multiple illnesses, also potentially for people to hear, hey, if you've not maybe reached out to some sort of social type of anything, it can be one person, it can be more than one person. You'll never know when you might need a hand to fall on too. So if you can reach out, do.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I also have in the works, and I'm hesitant to say too much about it just yet, but I am going to be creating an online pathway for people who are chronically ill. So just outlining my method and the healing pathway that I see working for myself and for my clients. So putting that into a format where people can walk through or journey through online, like a membership or an online course. So that's in the works as well. Um,
Okay,
and yeah,
nice.
yeah.
That's exciting.
These things
Yeah,
take time, right? These things take time.
they do.
Yeah, lots of exciting projects in the works, but I feel so, so passionate about serving this community as you do, because I think that,
I can feel it. So for those not actually interviewing Marie-Ève, I can feel it through the screen. Your
yes,
passion
yes,
for the greater helping of the community and others. I can feel that from
yes.
just talking to you on here. So
Love it, which is so funny because earlier when we were trying to say rite of passage, we said rite of passion.
yeah, yeah.
And it is a rite of passion because it does really, I think when we suffer and we go through something so intense, at least for me, it did light a fire inside of me of I want to give back, I want to contribute, I want to share what I've learned. Like if even one person cannot go through the suffering I went through, sign me up. I'm here for that. And I believe for me that was the purpose of the illness is think of what I can contribute now because of what I've gone through. Think of what you can contribute now because of what you've gone through. It's that
Yeah.
inspires me.
Yeah, two people who have had their hearts smashed open multiple times when they didn't think there was any more heart to smash open. And yeah, you can definitely tell. And I remember even when I met Marie-Ève in my earlier years of the illnesses, you could tell that you wanted to help. Yeah,
Mhm.
you wanted to help others not feel hopefully as terrible as you had. So
Yes.
yeah, so you're definitely, that's probably why I said passion. We were foreshadowing. So there you
You
go.
were. You were. It was like the beautiful Freudian slip. You were like right on, right on theme. I love it.
Strategic
Yeah,
foreshadowing.
I
Yeah,
love
so so it sounds like you have some perhaps some online type of pathway for people if they're looking for something that might help guide them along this process. Is there anything else that you foresee or is it continuing as you're already doing, helping so many through your practice and sharing?
Yeah, so it's the practice, it's the one-on-one psychotherapy, it's the courses, it's the intensives, it's hopefully this pathway or membership I want to create, it's book two. So for me, this is really the work of my lifetime. And I think that when we think of it that way, we think of sacrificing 10 years or 15 years to an illness, and it seems like so much. But when you, again, when you frame it as this is preparing me to do the work of my lifetime, you think, at least I think, this has been worth it. And for me, as hard as I suffered and as excruciating as it was, when I see what's possible on the other side and what I get to create, and that I get to craft the work of my life out of this, I think it's been so worthwhile. And if even one person can hear that and think, hey, something is taking shape for me here in the dark, and I don't know what it is yet, but something is taking shape in the dark, and it's going to be so worth it in the end, that person will have made our connection today worthwhile, and sending this podcast out into the world worthwhile.
Exactly. And that's exactly as you would assume this podcast is for. I felt strongly I needed to do it. And with the help of conversations from other people and inspiration of other podcasters, in particular two from the United States, who kind of helped pick me up when I called out into social media land. And then once it started, I knew it had to keep going. So I've got work to do here as well.
Yes, you were called, right? You were guided, you were called. Yes,
yeah.
I love it.
And once you kind of feel that, as you said, you can't really shake it out. You can't say, no, I'm gonna go back and do this again. It's in there. It's in there.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's how you know it's a true call. It's a true call when you know you can't not do it. And I think these rites of passage, these initiations, these intense moments of suffering or years of suffering, they leave you with that kind of fire. Like, I can't imagine not doing this, or I can't not serve in this way. Those are the true callings. That's why we're here. It's exciting.
And I can see some people listening, they'll be like, wait, I still feel like garbage. And there is an element of timing, right? The timing of hearing this for some people. I know for me, it's been in recent years, although I had this feeling of something's not quite right even before. As you said, one person hears this and says, what if, as your book says, what if, in such a gentle way of opening up for people, that the what if is just very, as you know, my brain needs your book certain days, especially. The good thing about I still have memory problems is so I can read it and then I'll forget, and then I'll go back and read it again and again and again and again.
Brand new all over again.
Exactly. Yeah.
Lacey, we could offer one thing maybe in closing to that person who is in the dark and who's having trouble with the higher level frameworks today of purpose and meaning. If I could offer one thing, it's just to be so kind and so gentle with yourself, and to learn to be your own best friend through the journey. I think for me, on my toughest days, what served me the most was developing a compassion and a tenderness towards myself, because walking through it and not being good to ourselves is hell. But if we can be kind and tender and compassionate with ourselves and access the medicine of our own hearts on the journey when it gets really, really dark, I think that for me was the difference between getting through or not on those tough days.
Well, yeah, thank you for sharing that, because as you know, we have all different walks of illness that might check out this podcast. And if you need a reminder of that kindness, in all honesty, I think you should check out Resting in Presence, Marie-Ève's book. There's some words in that book that will help you find that, or if not, the what if. So
thank you, Lacey. This has been such a pleasure. And I almost feel like we would have enough to do a part two. I just,
I felt, as I was like, I looked down at for those, I have a screener for my podcast, and I didn't really ask anything at all from it because we were cruising the entire time here. So I was going to apologize and say, sorry, Marie-Ève, I know I had some questions I was supposed to ask you, but I didn't. But next time. Next time.
I love it.
And now if people want to track you down to either get help with guidance, therapy, some of your future offerings, how would they best find you?
Thank you. Yes. So the best place to find me is at my website, which is centeredwithin.org. So centered is spelled CENTERED, centeredwithin.org. You can also find me on Instagram at centeredwithin, and that has links to my courses, my soul-centered psychotherapy, my books, my upcoming intensives is all there. And you can also get in touch with me through my site.
Awesome. Okay. And for those listening, I will also, on the Your Lyme Matters podcast website, I'll throw some of these details on there so that if you didn't take notes, you just wanted to enjoy this awesome podcast interview. That will be written there on my website as well for the Your Lyme Matters podcast. With that being said, I want to express my most sincere thanks for coming to join me today and sharing with the community, and also letting people know one of the other goals of the podcast, of this resource here in Calgary, Alberta, but also it sounds even internationally for people. Lyme literate or Lyme aware therapists, counselors are, I was going to say a dime a dozen. Is that the right sentence? But they're hard to find. Yeah, they're hard to find. So yeah, thank you for doing that. And I'm happy to know that I can send people your way if they're looking for that as well. Yeah, so Marie-Ève, thank you so much for joining me on the Your Lyme Matters podcast. And until we chat again.
Thank you so much.